Say Willie, say hey.
Say who?
Swinging at the plate, say hey.
Say who?
Say Willie, that giant kid is great. When he hits the ball, it's long gone man. Hits it farther than Campy can. Swings the bats like a little lead pipe. When they reach the ball, it's overripe. Say hey.
Alrighty, and welcome back. This is episode number 48 of the Shutdown Inning podcast. I am Stephen Rissotto alongside Tylor Hall. Well, Tyler, how's it going?
Hey everybody. We're doing all right. We're obviously here for something we're not, we weren't looking forward to discussing, but something that we need to talk about, and that's the life of Willie Mays, who left us yesterday at the age of 93. And so, you know, especially as not just Giants fans, but as baseball fans, need to take some time to reflect on that.
Yeah, in case anybody hasn't heard or has been living under a rock or just kind of has been sidetracked the last few days, as Tyler mentioned, Willie Mays did pass away at the age of 93. He is unequivocally one of, if not the greatest baseball player to ever don a uniform. One of the most iconic players to ever live. One of the most iconic people in Bay Area sports history, New York sports history, an American icon. There's just a lot of layers to it, and we kind of wanted to kind of take some time. We have some good guests coming up too. We'll be joined by Kerry, Crowley, and Rod Brooks. And just yeah, a very somber note. And I guess starting off, where were you when you kind of found out about this news?
Yeah, I was just picked up my son from my sister. She watched him for the day, and I was driving home and I saw a text from my sister. So I thought, oh, I must have forgot something at the house. So I checked it so I didn't have to get all the way home before I had to drive back to her house. And instead, she sent me the tweet that the Giants had put out announcing that Willie died.
Yeah, no, and I was kind of sitting in my room. I was watching the game, and I got the press email from the Giants announcing it, and um, I kind of looked at it half-heartedly, and I was waiting for it to say something else next to Willie Mays. And I know this sounds bad. I was waiting for it to say like maybe it was a family member that had passed or a friend that had passed or someone, close that, Willie Mays is, but I didn't I wasn't expecting it. Even though at 93 years old, like you said, we lived a long life and you're not surprised by it, but at the same time you are. Just because legends like this, you don't expect them to ever die. And Willie Mays, I think to a lot of people probably will never die. But just yeah, it was kind of a heartbreaking thing to look at. And a few minutes later, it was tweeted everywhere. Barry Bonds had put out a statement. The Giants had put out a statement. MLB had put out a statement. And the Giants broadcasters, just real quick, kudos to the Giants broadcasters. Dave Fleming on the radio side announced it and just was very clearly torn. You could hear his voice cracking. His voice always cracks, but you could hear him being, very emotional. And John Miller, who there's nobody better in baseball with the Giants organization to take the listener and the viewer through a situation like that than John Miller. And Hunter Pence was the color analyst, kind of just sat back and listened. But they just did a wonderful job kind of eulogizing Mays throughout the rest of the game. And I mean, it's not every day when someone of this capacity passes away and like you don't have a blueprint for this stuff. It just kind of happens and they dealt with it like pros.
Yeah, they did an amazing job, especially, getting caught off guard. I think part of the reason why it caught everyone so off guard is, the Rickwood game,
Yep.
2 days away from the day he passed. It's tomorrow. We're recording this on Wednesday, and everyone's just so excited about the celebration and focus on Willie Mays that game is going to bring. And now it's still just in completely different light than any of us wanted it to be. So I think, everyone was just so excited about that game and the spotlight on Willie. And like you said, he's larger than life. You know, you don't expect those figures to pass along. And so I think just the magnitude of who Willie is and was and what we're gonna be watching tomorrow is what
Yeah,
really hit a lot of people.
just the timing of it's crazy because like you mentioned the Rickwood game and that was kind of supposed to be the center of like recognizing Mays as like the greatest living player and recognizing the Negro Leagues and the history of it. And there's I think three of them left um from 1920 through 1948, I think the time span was. And there's like only a few of them left. Bill Greason is still around in Alabama. He's going to be throwing out the first pitch, who Mays played with in Birmingham. So there's a few left, but it was going to be a celebration, and that's why it kind of took me by surprise. You know, I guess Willie has a better seat to view all those festivities, and I know that he's going to be kind of proud looking down and watching Major League Baseball, not just like watching them play in his honor. They were going to do that anyways, but also watching MLB in the past few years put more recognition into the Negro Leagues and put more recognition into Willie Mays. And I think I can't remember if I told you this last night on the Spaces, but MLB and the Giants have done such a phenomenal job at keeping Willie Mays' name relevant. And they have a gallery across the street from the ballpark. They did an HBO documentary not too long ago. John Shea, who's a great friend of Willie Mays, one of the first people I thought of when I saw this, he wrote the book. There's so many things in the past few years that have kept Willie Mays' name, relevant for the younger baseball fans to learn. And I think that's really respectable because at the end of the day, Willie Mays, like that was who he always appealed to, was the young kid in Harlem. And we could get into that, but the young kid in Harlem and the young kid in San Francisco, and we all have like the stories about how we first got um accustomed to hearing Willie Mays' voice. And I think it's just very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah. It's still there's still times throughout the day, and where I still can't believe it's real, and I
Yeah.
kind of have a loss for words. But yeah, I mean, I think one thing I've seen some people say is like you should tell people what you think of them or how you feel of them when they're still here. And I think the Giants have always done a good job of doing that for Willie. And I think he knows that Giants and baseball fans everywhere love him. And so luckily there's tributes pouring in from everyone and that's awesome. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I think Willie knew that. It's not something that, I wish Willie could have known. He knows that he was loved by Giants fans and the organization.
Yeah, and just to kind of name off some of the accolades here, 24-time All-Star, which is insane. And you might be wondering how did he, make 24 All-Star games when he played 23 years? And it's because sometimes they would have two All-Star games. But Ted Williams said that the All-Star game was invented for Willie Mays, which is really cool. 24-time All-Star, and that's 24 years in a row of being an All-Star. He was an All-Star from 54 to 73. Um, World Series champion in 54, the two-time NL MVP winner in 54 and 65, 10 years apart. That's extremely hard to do, win an MVP 10 years apart. Won the Rookie of the Year in 51, a 12-time Gold Glove Award winner, 12 straight seasons, Clemente Award in 71, won a batting championship in 54, led the NL in home runs four seasons, led the NL in steals 4 seasons, 4 straight seasons. Um, Hit 4 home runs in a game in 1961 at County Stadium in Milwaukee. We heard that maybe he could have hit five if the wind wasn't blowing in. And Hank Aaron, I think, caught a ball at the track. Um, the Giants retired Willie Mays' number 24. The Mets retired Willie Mays' number 24. He's on the Wall of Fame. He's an all-century team guy. I mean, just the list goes on and on. With a Hall of Fame induction in 1978 in his first year. I think like 20 people 20 writers didn't vote for him, whoever they were. And I think I saw an unbelievable quote today. I think I liked it on Twitter, so I'm going to see if I could find it. Um, but it was a classic quote. Um, and it was basically like if Willie Mays didn't get um Oh man, let's see it. Here it is. So 23 voters did not vote Mays for the Hall of Fame. So the New York Daily News columnist Dick Young, who's just a legend in the sports journalism world, wrote, quote, if Jesus Christ were to show up with his old baseball glove, some guys wouldn't vote for him. He dropped the cross 3 times, didn't he? So that, I mean, that's such an amazing quote that sums up the whole voting process, but just an amazing resume. One of the
Yeah.
best of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you say it a little bit later in the episode, but some players are famous for doing, people went to see them to do one thing, and you went to see Willie play to do all
Yep.
things. Um, I've been thinking a lot the last few days. I went to Tampa this year, like we talked about, and I talked to this old usher named Lou, who was from the Bronx, but he said that when the Yankees weren't in town, he was taking the train one stop across to the Polo Grounds because he wanted to watch Willie Mays play. He just transcended baseball, man. Like everyone loved him, and the way he carried himself through, everything that he had to go through as an African American man in the 50s and 60s. Uh, Loved kids, even up until, recently, like if there was anything he could do for a kid, he would do it. And it's amazing. It's crazy to think that like the best player of all time would do whatever he could to help a kid. I wish more players nowadays were like that with children. And what's crazy is, and I think you know this, Steven, but the catch, which is what a lot of people think of when they first hear Willie Mays' name. That glove isn't in Cooperstown. He gave it to a kid after the game because they needed a glove.
That's insane. I did not know that. Or I can't remember if I've heard that before, but that's crazy. And he says that it's not even one of his best catches.
Yeah,
So I think he ranks the Bobby Bonds catch, the one where he ran into Bobby Bonds at Candlestick in right center field and hung on to the ball. And there's another one that he always talks about with Bobby Morgan at the Polo Grounds or at Ebbets Field where he knocked himself
yeah,
out in the warning track. I know John Shea writes about that one extensively. Um, and there's just the home runs, and we talk about it a little bit later on with Rod, but we talked about how if he didn't play at Candlestick, and Rod called it the two stupidest ballparks ever invented, and he played at both of them, Polo Grounds and Candlestick, which probably took away a bunch of homers from him. And he served in the war. He's a veteran. Missed 2 seasons, 52 and 53, and just we never got to see the full extent of Mays with the ballpark and in the serving. He would have gotten the Roos record before Aaron did. So
yeah. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of what ifs there. I mean, if he sets the all-time home run record, does he ever even leave the Giants? Does he go back to play for the Mets in New York to end his career? Um, and we talked about it. Steven and I had a spaces yesterday just for anyone who wanted to come on and talk Willie for a few minutes. And, we're kind of coming out of the era now where it's the stories that these guys live on by because we have tape on all these guys now. You can go back and see every, Trout at bat, every Pujols at bat, every Bonds at bat, where, like you said, the catch Willie says wasn't even his best catch. He made handfuls that he calls better, but there's no footage of them. So
yep,
it's just the stories that live on. And I mean, you and I never saw Willie play. A lot of the people we talked to, have never seen him play, and it's just the stories from our families or our friends that did get to see him play for them to, and I mean, Willie Mays is still one of the first baseball players I ever knew as a kid. I never saw him play, but I heard about him because, grew up in Northern California as a Giants fan, and you got to start baseball with Willie Mays. And so now, we'll get to tell the stories to our kids someday.
exactly. It gets passed down, and I have two uncles that are big Giants fans, and my grandpa was a big Giants fan, and he always talked about Willie Mays to them, and then my uncles would tell me about Willie Mays, and actually my uncle Pat, who had a great tweet last night, he gifted me Mays's James Hirsch biography, um, a long time ago when I was first kind of like building up my baseball book library, and it was one of the first baseball books that I read. And in the inscription, I think he wrote something like, "This is somebody you need to learn about." Willie Mays, and that's kind of how it happens. Like you mentioned, we don't have a lot of footage of this stuff. But the verbal stories that kind of live on have been instrumental in us learning about Mays, from just like him being a kid in Alabama, being a high school football player, to playing in the Negro Leagues as a teenager, and then playing in New York and winning a championship, moving to San Francisco, having great years in San Francisco, the civil rights stuff, not being able to buy a house in San Francisco, maybe not being as vocal as some of the civil rights leaders wanted him to be. And then like his post playing career, like he had a huge impact there too. He retires, and I think he was banned from baseball for a little bit, right? Had the whole thing with the
Yeah.
casino, where he was a greeter at a casino, and the commissioner of baseball didn't like that very much and banned him and Mickey Mantle. And then the Giants, under new ownership, kind of just locked him up to a lifetime extension. Peter McGowan had that idea. Larry Baer had that idea. They said, you know what? I think Willie was going through some. Willie was not very good with his money. He got ripped off a lot by so-called friends. He would, give them money, and then he would never see any of it back. And he kind of always had some financial issues. Never had an agent, never had an advisor, and the Giants took care of him the last part of his life. Um, and we always hear about like him just standing at the table in spring training, sitting at the table, and like players gravitating towards him. So it's just a really cool thing. And being at the ballpark, that was a big deal for fans to see him.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it, I tweeted about it, just like being at the ballpark and Willie's there. It's just, he just had that presence that you don't really get with even some of the other great players. Like it was just different when you look down at the field and it's Willie Mays, or when he just decides he wants to speak at Barry Bonds'
Yeah.
retirement. And I think what was Kipe's line? When Mr. Mays wants to talk, you let him talk.
There's not a lot of video on that. I can't find the video for my life. The full video. There's
Uh,
clips, but there's not the full speech, but I remember the full speech. And
yeah.
like that's another like part of this, and like probably, we could few more talking points before we get into the interviews, but like the Bonds thing. I know like we talked a little bit about off air, like the Bonds effect. Because
Mhm.
I mean, there's no Bonds without, as Rod said, there's no Bonds without Mays.
Yeah, I mean, there's that one picture that I've seen on the timeline quite a bit of like maybe like a 5 or 6 year old Barry Bonds in the dugout with Willie Mays. That's just amazing. And Barry credits Willie a lot with just teaching him how to handle himself, how to be a ball player. So like, maybe he still becomes a baseball player, probably not as great, and then he probably doesn't feel the connection as strongly to come back and be a Giant and play here in the Bay Area without Willie. Um, you know, it's crazy to think that, he wasn't just an influence, he was his godfather. And his tribute to Willie yesterday was pretty touching as well, saying, give my dad a hug for me.
Yeah.
Um, we're really lucky as Giants fans to have had so many great players, and that the organization knows how to bring them back and do it the right way. Um, it really does feel like they're like part of the extended, part of the baseball family, but when you get used to seeing guys like Willie Mays and Barry Bonds and Willie McCovey at the ballpark and Cepeda, and man, I mean, we're naming off like an all-star team from Cooperstown, and it was at a point where like you weren't surprised if you went to the ballpark and you saw him that day. It's just amazing to think that is, the baseball life that we get to live as Giants fans.
It's insane. And I am 22 years old. I didn't see any of these people play. None of the guys in the 60s, and neither have you. But the fact that like it's still able to hit us both in the way it did, I think it's meaningful. It's really meaningful, and I'm glad that we could take some time and talk about him a little bit today. And he is the greatest of all time, and I think greatest of all time. And and it's, again, I know a lot of people say it's hard to compare eras, and it is. And Ruth didn't play against the same competition that Mays played. Um, and there's always guys, there's guys with more power than Mays. There's guys that played probably better defense than Mays, who had a better arm, but nobody put the full package together. Nobody put five tool player more than Willie Mays.
Yeah.
And like, there's just no example of, and ne- passing the
When,
torch to Bonds, but there's nobody better at baseball. He did everything great.
yeah, I mean, what's crazy is like he never thought about himself as far as like on the baseball field. He was like, and if you read John Shay's 24, can't recommend it enough. Like he talks about he was always trying to put him and his teammates in the best position for success. And he's talked about like if I knew 30-30 was a thing, I would have done it every year,
Mhm.
and he was very humble, and even he has said that, like I think I'm the best baseball player I ever saw. And I fully agree, Mr. Mays.
Fully agree. And definitely rest in peace, Willie Mays. I know a lot of people are gonna get out to that Monday night game, the first home game back after this. And the Rickwood game, we're looking forward to that at the time of the recording. This should be up the same day, but tomorrow is the Rickwood game. We're looking forward to it. And I was gonna watch everything. I'm gonna consume all that content because Willie Mays is one of those guys where it's like, if there's anybody that needed to be, and I don't necessarily, I'm not necessarily a fan of this tactic. But like Wayne Gretzky's number was retired for anybody in the NHL because he was like the best player to ever live. But if there's one person who would have their number retired universally that's not named Jackie Robinson, I think Willie Mays is a pretty good argument. Um, and I hope
Yeah,
they all, I hope they all wear 24 at the Rickwood game.
I hope so. I think they can make that happen. And yeah, I forget where I was going to go with it from there, Steven. But yeah, I agree. I hope they were. Oh yeah, I've even seen people saying like maybe they should change the Major League Baseball logo. The NBA logo is Jerry West's silhouette, who we just lost recently as well. Maybe they can make the Major League Baseball logo Willie's silhouette. That would be very fitting as well.
Isn't it Harmon Killebrew now or somebody like
It
that?
is it? It's just kind of like a generic outline of a dude, I think. It might be. Maybe that was after a Killebrew picture.
Yeah, I have no
Um,
idea. I'll have to double check that. I might just be throwing out some false stuff. But yeah, no, we're just excited for everybody to listen to these two interviews that we have lined up. We did one with Kerry Crowley of KMBR, formerly Giants beat writer, who just had some good interactions with Mays. Kerry's a lifelong San Franciscan, he's got family ties that taught him about Mays, taught him about the Giants. And then Rod Brooks, who we all just adore, and we adore Kerry too. But Rod Brooks, who we all adore, who was with KMBR for a lot of years and now does some stuff with NBC Sports Bay Area. He reflected a lot too. Um, so yeah, these interviews turned out great, and we're excited for everybody to kind of hear them. So let's get into it. Here they
let's
are. All right, back on the shutdown inning, and we are pleased to be joined by Kerry Crowley, former beat writer for KMBR, the Mercury News, now with the Athletic. Also, you could hear him on on air at KMBR 680 1045. He does the sports phone 680. He does some other stuff. He's kind of the jack of all trades at that station. So Kerry, I wish that you could join us for better circumstances, but how's it going?
It's going okay, all things considered. I mean, I think the news that we're going to discuss has hit Giants fans and really the baseball community, sports fans in general, really hard over the last 24 hours. And it's such a privilege to be able to talk about Willie Mays. It was such a privilege to meet him, and I'm excited to be able to honor his life. And I'm really glad that you guys are pulling together a few different people here because everyone has a Willie story, whether you watched him play or you didn't. And I think that's what makes him such a unique character in American sports history.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's just iconic. And so, how did you first hear the news of Willie passing away, and what were your initial reactions to that news?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being honest, I had just stepped off the metro in Washington, D.C. last night when I heard the news and it popped up on my phone. And unfortunately, my immediate reaction was I need to check in with work and make sure that we've got all our bases covered and, make sure that we're handling this in the proper ways. But then the first thing I did after that was I texted my mom and I texted her a picture of Willie Mays and her because Willie was the reason that she fell in love with baseball. And she was born in San Francisco right after Willie and the Giants moved to the Bay Area. And she's the reason that I'm a baseball fan today. And she became a baseball fan because of Willie Mays. And so I think that, she was watching on the TV broadcast last night as the Giants broadcasters broke it down. And obviously, heartbroken over that news because of what Willie meant to her, what Willie meant to our family. And, I think the greater city of San Francisco and the Bay Area in general as well. And so my first thought was just, to talk to my mom in that situation because she was such a profound influence and Willie was the profound influence in her life.
Yeah, my first thought was to text my uncles too. So there's a lot of people in San Francisco and in the Bay Area and beyond, in New York and Alabama, and just so many places where Willie touched, where it is an impact. And a lot of us who have never even seen him play,
Yeah.
not the three of us have never seen him play, but we hear from the stories that are passed down. And you kind of mentioned it right there. You're, a San Franciscan, and you have a lot of rich ties to San Francisco, and being that you just said that you wouldn't be a baseball fan without your mom. How did that kind of impact your view of Willie Mays, just being from San Francisco and all of that?
I mean, I think that San Franciscans have been treated to the greatest sports figures that almost any region has ever had. And Willie is like the foundational figure in all of it. You think about Joe Montana with the 49ers, you think about Steph Curry with the Golden State Warriors, and Willie is the ultimate pillar that Bay Area sports have been built upon. I mean, Willie is not only the greatest athlete in his sport, but someone who is universally loved on and off the field. I mean, I just think that what he did and his rise to stardom at a time when the civil rights movement was taking place in the United States, and his rise helped Black community earn respect. And it's shocking to think that that was so recent. And yet, Willie has led this unbelievable life, and it was both on and off the field. And I think that Willie's tenure in San Francisco as a baseball player was unmatched, unparalleled, and we can spend hours talking about that on end. But I think it's also, what he meant off the field for people in San Francisco, for the African American community, and just for anyone who was looking for a hero at that time. I think that Willie represented so many things that are great about not just baseball players, not just athletes, but human beings. And the way that he treated people, the way that he went about his business, I just have nothing but respect. And to learn about the stories of Willie through the years has been one of the great privileges of following the San Francisco Giants and being, from San Francisco, from the Bay Area. And I just, I love the guy. I absolutely love the guy. And so it's what makes this such a hard day, even though, like you said, I'm not someone who got to watch him play, but I did get to experience Willie Mays. And I think we've all experienced Willie Mays.
Definitely. And that leads really well into where we wanted to go to next. You mentioned that you got to meet Willie, you got to introduce your mom to Willie, it sounds like, which is pretty awesome. What are some of your, favorite memories, or maybe even your first memory of meeting Willie Mays when you were on the beat?
Yeah, there were so many, moments where Willie would come into the Giants clubhouse and want to meet a new player or want to talk to a specific player, and they were always in awe of this is Willie Mays and he wants to come meet me. But he was diehard, devoted, dedicated to Giants baseball in a way where, like, if the Giants were losing 10-3 in the seventh inning, and he saw an outfielder, pop off the bench and come in and make a great catch in center field for the Giants, he would want to meet them the next day because he was enamored of their play, and he thought that they did something the right way. And so it was always fun getting to have those little interactions where you see Willie and him interact with a specific player, a specific person, and them just being, awestruck after the fact. That was always such a cool moment. But for me, my favorite personal interaction was spring training 2019, I want to say. I sat in the Giants renovated clubhouse in Scottsdale, and the media period had ended, all the players had gone out to the field, but Willie was sitting there in the hallway in a chair outside of the clubhouse, and Marty Lurie was sitting down talking with him, and Marty introduced me. John Shea was there. John Shea introduced me, and I talked to Willie about growing up in Alabama, and he told stories that were about his football career in Alabama as a high school football player. And he talked to people, in that room, it was just reporters, about playing quarterback and evading pass rushers and what he was looking for when he was playing quarterback and the different coaches' instructions back then. And I was just sitting there afterward, I'm thinking, who in the world has gotten to sit and listen to Willie Mays talk about playing football and about dominating his competition like that? It was one of the greatest moments, I think, of my, not just career, but life, thinking about, here's this person that everyone in the world would want to meet. And I had the opportunity to have such a unique conversation with him. And he was so thrilled to talk about, an old memory that he cherished so deeply. I think that, when we think of Willie, we obviously think of the on-field achievements and, what he meant to people off the field, but also just a tremendous storyteller as well. I mean, his high-pitched voice and, getting up at Barry Bonds' number retirement in San Francisco, there's so many moments that we associate with Willie and his voice and the stories that he told that I think make him such a larger than life figure.
Yeah, and you mentioned John Shea, and John Shea was another one of the guys that I first thought of when I saw the news. And for anybody that hasn't read it, read John
Yeah.
Shea's 24 book. I know it's one of your favorites. You've tweeted about it before. I know it's one of Tyler's favorites, one of my favorites. Unbelievable, relationship that those two had. And John actually, it's crazy that John is in Alabama, and that's kind of where the Rickwood Field game is going to happen down there in Birmingham. And it was supposed to be kind of a celebration and a recognition of Mays being the greatest living player. Now it's going to have a little bit of a different sentiment, a little bit of a different
Yeah.
feel. Um, how do you expect this to maybe change the festivities happening at Rickwood?
Well, it's a tough question to answer because I don't know exactly how, the folks at Rickwood and the folks in Alabama and with Major League Baseball were planning to honor Willie, but I'm sure that it was going to be a major component of everything that they were doing at the stadium. And I know that that's been written about extensively, but I think that there's no way you can hold this game on Thursday without, almost every moment, you know, tying back to Willie and almost every conversation that people are having around the game, centered on Willie and his career and his upbringing and what he and other black players at the time in the Negro Leagues fought to make possible in Major League Baseball one day. And I think, the stories of Willie as a teenager at Rickwood Field with the Birmingham Black Barons are, they live on because Willie captivated people in Alabama and then he captivated people across America. And we're so fortunate in San Francisco to have had the stories vividly passed down through generations of Giants fans who watched his every moment. But the moments of him as a teenager in Alabama are just as important. And I think that there will be this huge celebration of life on Thursday. And I hope that it's as vibrant and as joyful as possible because Willie on the baseball field was as vibrant and as joyful and as competitive as any player who's ever taken the field. And I think that, I hope that the players are able to honor him with a great game. I hope that MLB, takes the right tone. But I know that the fans in attendance and the people down in Alabama will be able to celebrate the life of Willie Mays in the proper way. And, I just think like everything about this game is made possible in part because of what Willie achieved in his life. And I hope that everyone takes the time to remember that on Thursday, and I have no doubt that they will.
Absolutely. And you talked a little bit about, Willie on the field. You mentioned that even off the field, he was even more impactful. I mean, I know he left for a little bit, went back to the Mets, but he's been basically associated with the Giants organization for over 70 years now. And you've gotten to see that kind of, as a fan, kind of a little bit behind the scenes. Can you just talk a little bit about Willie's impact specifically on the Giants organization?
Yeah, I think one of the great things about watching different players come through the Giants organization is, obviously there have been so many incredible talents from Juan Marichal to Willie McCovey to Barry Bonds. And, so many different players from previous generations have been around the team and have had conversations with players on the field during batting practice and have had, moments where they've used their influence for good with the San Francisco Giants, with the community, with the junior Giants, with various aspects of the franchise and what it's involved in. But I don't think anyone had quite the sway that Willie Mays had. And when I say that, I mean, when Willie walked into the room, it was like time stopped. It's like there's just everything takes a back seat to what Willie's doing right now. And it wasn't because, you were afraid that you might upset Willie, or you were afraid that, he would pop off in a different direction or anything like that. You just wanted to soak it in. And, I can, it's almost like there are very few figures in American history who I could think that would be possible with. And where there's a lot of people who would just want to go up immediately and take a photo, a selfie, and ask a quick question and move on. With Willie, you almost wanted to observe everything that he wanted to do, and I think that that's the difference. I think that when Barry's out there and when these other great players step out on the field, fans are always tracking them down and trying to get a wave. And I think with Willie, you just watch and learn. And I think that that was true from the beginning to the end. And I've learned so much from watching him conduct his business in the clubhouse and, teach young players about his philosophy on the game and just the impact that he had on everyone who came through the organization. The Giants are so much better off and such a richer franchise because of Willie Mays' presence. And it's something that they never should forget. And I'm confident they never will forget.
Yeah, no doubt. And final thing here, and I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw all the tributes, and Jimmy Rollins was talking about how when he was in camp with the Giants that one year, Mays would call him over and go, "How many career hits do you have?" and like that type of thing. And
Yeah,
Chris Young was not Rangers Chris Young, not Diamondbacks Chris Young was talking about how he was in San Francisco and Willie noticed him play and like really liked his style of play and like said, "I want to talk
exactly.
to that guy." So kind of
Yeah,
what you alluded to earlier, and it's like Chris Young, who had a good career, not like an amazing career. So it just tells you how many people Willie touched. And on Twitter, I mean, everybody was kind of going into, and this is kind of natural reaction to talk about like, well, who's the greatest of all time, right? And he was, I think that the common sentiment and the common theme was he is one of the best to ever do it. Where does Willie Mays stand in your mind in terms of like the standing of the standing of the GOAT? Who is the GOAT in baseball? Where does Willie Mays rank in terms of that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to like compare across generations and understand what a player from the 60s and 70s, and I mean, Willie, he got going as a teenager in the 40s, would have done against today's competition. But I don't think you can tell the story of baseball without having Willie Mays in the first paragraph and the last paragraph. I mean, he's that significant to the sport. And when you think about American baseball and when the sport was at its greatest heights and who was dominating the sport at that time, it was Willie Mays. I mean, it was Willie who, brought the sport to San Francisco. It was Willie who made the Giants what they are today. But also, this is someone who was a star in New York at the Polo Grounds, and just 1954, the catch and Vic Wertz and all of that. Like we all know so many bits of history of this sport because of Willie Mays and his greatness. And so, you can have Barry Bonds with his home run total. You can have Cy Young with his win total and all these different players in history. But I think that there's a lot of people who would say, oh, Bonds, he's fifth or sixth for me, even though he's probably a top two guy for me. Or, you can have all these other people, but no one's ranking Mays outside their top two. And any other argument is just some crazy agenda that folks have. And so I think to me, it's like, if you polled every baseball fan in the world, the poll would overwhelmingly have Willie Mays at number one. And not that that's like a true testament of someone's legacy or anything like that, but I go back to telling the story of the game. You can't do it without Willie Mays, and I think that you can't do it in a way that gets you two or three paragraphs in without featuring him prominently.
Yeah, and who did Babe Ruth play against? I think that's another thing. And I saw a quote and it was like people went to the ballpark to see Babe Ruth do one thing, and people went to the
Yep.
ballpark to see Willie Mays do everything. So
Yep.
I think that's a
Yeah.
good way to put it.
That's
Well,
well said.
Kerry, we really appreciate the few minutes here, and it was awesome getting your thoughts on this. And I think a lot of Giants fans and people around the baseball world will continue to mourn the loss of Willie Mays, but also celebrate his life. And I'm glad that you were able to spend a few minutes with us here.
Thank you both for having me.
All right, back here with Rod Brooks, and Rod is nice enough to take some time. Formerly of KMBR, he fills in every now and then. He'll fill in this week, and you could catch him on NBC Sports Bay Area as well, covering the Niners, covering the Giants. He kind of does all sorts of things. Rod, kind of a somber note, but it's good to have you on and kind of reflect. Thanks for coming on the show.
It's good to see you again, and my pleasure. I think we can all agree this is a day none of us wanted to come. Clearly, it's a dumb thing to say. There was an expectation because Willie was up there in age, but he had been with us for so long. Not that we took it for granted, but we just got so used to him being around, and that's such a comforting feeling. But we know that everything is finite, and you knew it was coming, and maybe you sort of braced yourself for it. But yesterday was hard, man. It was really hard.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying that, it was always one of those things, like you said, Willie was 93, lived a very full life. And, it was one of, you kind of would think about it a little bit that it could happen. But anytime I would start thinking that, I would just make myself stop because I didn't want
Yep.
to put those thoughts into the universe. So, speaking of yesterday and the news that we all got, how did you first hear the news, and what was your initial reaction when you heard that Willie had passed away?
Well, I want to go back to last week when I was at the ballpark, for a little bit of work and a little bit of fun watching the Astros series. I saw Dusty. And that was the first time I'd gotten a chance to talk to Dusty Baker in years. So it was good to catch up with him. And we were in a box, not a suite, but right next to Crooked Cut. There's a box. I think it's an auxiliary broadcasting box. And I went to see Crooked Cut first. They were like, Dusty's next door. You should go see him. So, of course, I'm going to go see Dusty. And I go in there, we chop it up and, talk baseball. And, I got a chance to thank him for some things that I had been meaning to thank him for. And there's a picture on the wall. And in that picture was Willie McCovey, Willie Mays, Gaylord Perry, Orlando Cepeda, Juan Marichal, and I think Monty Irvin was in the picture. And Dusty was in the box by himself. And, as we were talking, he looked over his shoulder, looked at the picture, and, his voice kind of started to trail off. And he's like, yeah, I went to see Willie a few days ago, and he's not good. And when he told me that, like we were talking before, we knew that the end was coming. We didn't know when it was coming, and we didn't want to know. And so when he told me that, it was one of those like, I'm not surprised. Hear it, surprised. So that was last Tuesday. I forget exactly which day. And then I'm watching the game yesterday on television, and I knew something was weird. This is where my media brain kicks in. I knew something was weird when came back and the cameras were pointed at the sky, at the facade, at the top of Wrigley Field and at the sky. And that is, in the business, when they start pointing at the sky and at the action on the field, they're about to tell you that someone, or about to talk about someone who had recently passed. So I was like, this is weird. Again, just as we talked about before we went hot, when we started to think about Willie's mortality, we immediately tamped that down. Like, I'm not trying to hear that right now. So even though I knew something along those lines, that they were about to tell me about someone's death or talk about someone who recently passed, it did not enter to my mind that it would be Willie Mays. And when John Miller, who is there any better person to deliver that terrible news to Giants fans and everyone who loved Willie Mays, there's not a better person. But when John Miller said passed away peacefully this afternoon at the age of 93, I gasped and went, "Oh my God!" And it reminded me of, and this is where the pain becomes personal for me. It reminded me when my grandmother passed, my maternal grandmother, who I was very close to, who loved Willie Mays and introduced me to Willie Mays and taught me the gospel of Willie Mays in baseball. It was like when she passed, and I would think it's like a lot of people's grandparents or parents pass, is that it's coming, but nothing prepares you for that impact. And it hit and it hurt because all of those emotions, thinking about my grandmother, my grandparents, and my old man, my pops, who was a Willie Mays fan as well, all those emotions came back, and it was just like, this stinks. But I knew I wasn't alone. And I knew, even though Twitter can be a cesspool, I knew I could get it out on Twitter. And We congregated there, and everybody got it out at the same time. That made it feel and make it feel better.
Yeah, it was one of those situations where like you just see like every single tweet and it was like. And just everybody's pouring tributes. It was just a wonderful kind of like you mentioned, conjugation of just like everybody sharing their favorite memories. And one of the memories that stuck out is something that you just kind of touched on. You tweeted that, and I'm gonna read it for those that weren't on Twitter. You said, I learned to love baseball because of my old man and my grandparents. They all loved Willie. I was preached the gospel of the say hey kid. I love that. The gospel of the say hey kid from the jump. In black houses in the 60s, there were three pictures on every wall, JFK, MLK, and Willie Mays. He was a superhero to millions. So kind of touch on like that family dynamic because similar, like I heard a lot. I mean, my uncles gifted me the James Hirsch Willie Mays biography years ago, and it was one of the first and he wrote in it like this is somebody you need to like learn about. So talk about kind of that family dynamic that you had with Willie.
So Robinson is an American hero and clearly very important. Hank Aaron. Okay? You're not going to find an African American that doesn't love Hank Aaron. But Willie was different because Willie was like that first superstar, that first black superhero, where he was on the cover of Time magazine and Life magazine. He was on an episode of Bewitched, in the 60s, right? For a black man to be, a black athlete, be on Cast Network television back when that was a big thing, was huge. He was a spokesman. He owned his own businesses. He had, and I hate this word, but he had it. He had swag. He was loved by, and he for Black Americans, he made it like if Willie Mays could do it, if Willie Mays can be accepted by white America, then we all have a chance. And not that we were all going to be Willie Mays, not that my father, who grew up in the 50s and 60s and 70s, was going to be Willie Mays, not that my grandfather or not that my uncles or my cousins, not that any, but it was just like, you can do it, you can do it. And again, even if you weren't a baseball fan, I was lucky that, my grandparents, by virtue of their love in baseball, my father became a baseball fan and passed it along to me. I was lucky, but even folks who didn't like baseball, just because of what he represented. And again, this is not to say that Jackie Robinson didn't have that same representation, but it just didn't hit the same. Not to say that Hank Aaron didn't have that same representation, but it just didn't hit the same like it did with Willie Mays. And he was thinking about, my grandmother and my grandfather and uncles and aunts talk about him. These are black folks that I grew up with from East Texas, and they were born in the late 1920s, early 1930s. So they saw it. So then when I come along, as a kid in the late 70s, early 80s, they have lived 3 lifetimes, right? And they're passing all of that down onto me. But what Willie Mays, to them, he was athletically gifted, but he was an inspirational figure to them. That's why he was so important. It's like Muhammad Ali. He gave you something to shoot for when, as a black person in 40s, 50s, and 60s, and early 70s, you didn't have a lot at times, too many times, to feel good about. Yet he made you feel good. What he had to do to make you feel good was do something that he was so gifted at, which is playing baseball, or smile. Man, that's a $1 million smile. And it racial barriers, and it the hearts, even the the most virulent racists. They might have hated all black people.
Yeah, well put. We were going to talk about his impact on the country and on the civil rights movement. You just articulated it beautifully. So, one of the other tweets you put out yesterday was that iconic picture of Willie playing stickball in the streets of Harlem, and I think you said it was one of the most iconic photos in American history, and I agree. I remember seeing that as a kid, and I remember just thinking, how cool would it be to play stickball with Willie Mays?
Get ice cream with him. He pays for your ice
Yeah.
cream.
Yeah,
Really?
right. Yeah.
Yeah, what a deal. What a day. So yeah, I mean, maybe just, talk about that side of Willie a little bit, or maybe, on that photo.
He was black excellence. He was obviously playing for the Giants at the time, so he's in Harlem, where only he could be, because they didn't let black folks live where they wanted to live, and unfortunately he had to deal with the same thing in San Francisco. But in Harlem, and he's surrounded by all of these beautiful black people, and there's the star, there's the hero, there's the icon. Yet he's there, he's real, he's tangible. You're not seeing him, from dead center in the Polo Grounds, of a mile away, like you're 15 feet away from him. Well, what I love about the photograph, I love the cityscape, the brownstones in the background, and the 1950s giant automobile, sort of in the middle. But what I really love about the picture is that while it's a stickball game, he's literally holding a stick. Somebody's throwing a ball at him. Willie Mays' moment, in that frozen moment in time, serious as a heart attack. Because you look at that picture, coiled, man. His arms, because he's wearing a short sleeve shirt, might even be a cutoff shirt, but he's showing you the gun. I don't have them. The muscles are taut. That spring loaded, and he is ready to go. And that swing on his back foot, he's already loaded. He's ready to go. He's ready to be Willie Mays. And so that ball is going to go far. And what I imagine, the side of that picture, what you can't see in the photo, you see Willie. But what you can't see is some 10-year-old kid in Harlem who's playing stickball with Willie Mays, who's throwing him, that pink rubber ball, and he's like, "This is the greatest day of my life," and Willie is like, "Damage." Like that's the picture I love. Because again, you look at the picture, he is locked, loaded. It's a snapshot of America at the time. The subject, Willie Mays, is I think the photograph is just beautifully framed, and to capture, we always saw athletically, we always saw him moving gracefully, moving at a very high speed, but to see him static, you don't get a lot of that. I don't think there's enough for me to consume, but you don't get a lot of video just of him right before the moment of he's about to do something incredible. And it just, every time I see, and the black and white nature of it, this is kind of where you get artsy fartsy with it, but the black and white nature of it, I think the starkness as well. If it were a photo in color, like knocking out Lister, see that photo in color, see it in black and white, it really gets your attention. I think the same thing in the Willie playing stickball photo. It being in black and white just makes it even more incredible and special.
Yeah, whoever was throwing him the ball that day, we got to get them on the podcast and discuss that. That would be an incredible find if we were to ever track down those names.
That ball is still circumnavigating the Earth like a low orbit satellite.
I was looking at like some of those clips, and I was like, God, like what? Like they're standing so close, and like they're all in the street. Like, what if someone gets hit with a comebacker? And I was like, I mean that back leg and those wrists. I mean, that's 660 homers all over it.
No joke.
Yeah, and just to do it and like it's a whole day. We could go on for like a few hours talking about how he did it. A lot of it at Candlestick, which is insane. But I wanted to touch on
two of the dumbest parks of all time. If you, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was thinking about this morning. Korea, So not only did he become the greatest ball player of all time, he also served his country honorably for 2 years, just like Ted Williams, just like many others. 2 years in Korea, started at the Polo Grounds, comes the Candlestick, possible place you could put a ballpark before it was then closed. No one played a career in two of the dumber ballparks ever created in Major League Baseball history, and he still hit 660 home runs.
It's just insane. And like, if he didn't miss the 2 years in Korea and he played maybe at like a more neutral ball, and like the ballparks back then were huge, then like he would have gotten to Ruth's record before Aaron did. Like there's no question about it. So
he would have gotten to that record before Aaron did. He'd have hit home runs, and Barry might never have caught it.
I mean, yeah, it's a big what if, and that's the fun game that we could always play, for sure. And have you, like, what are your interactions or your favorite interactions that you've had with him over the years? Like, because being someone who's worked in sports media, in this market for a long time, I'm sure that you've had some memorable run-ins.
Now, see, this is where, nice job, Oprah. This is where you're gonna make my eyes sweat. So, as I said, I got my love of baseball. My grandmother, Marilyn, God rest her soul specifically, and my old man. So, been lucky enough done that I wanted to do and things that I never dreamed of. I got into this whole thing because I just wanted to go to games for free. I had no high-minded, I'm going to be a journalist, whatever, radio, whatever. I was a kid that all I wanted to do was just go to games. And I found a profession where you could go to games for free. I dove right into it. So I've gotten a chance to go to Super Bowls, NBA Finals, World Series games, Stanley Cup Finals games, Olympics. I've been to Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I've been everywhere I wanted to go. And more places I didn't even think I wanted to go. But the highlight of my career was when I met Willie Mays at ballpark. It was just a random meeting. But I got to shake his hand, and he said my name. And I immediately called my grandmother, my old man, to tell him that I met Willie Mays, shook his hand, and he said my name. And at that point, I that's what I wanted to do. Like I said, my whole thing was just to be able to go to games for free. At that point, I had made it. I'd done what I wanted to do, and I was, I don't know, maybe 28 years old. So I'm still very young in this business, but I had made it. And to be able to call my grandmother, tell her my heroes, be able to tell my heroes that I met their hero. That guy you were telling me about, that mythical figure you were telling me about when I was a kid. I got to meet him, shake his hand, said my name. To be able to tell them that, it still is the highlight of my career and one of the absolute highlights of my life. Because I made it too. They were never going to get that opportunity because of circumstances, right? They were never going to get that opportunity. Their boy did. That was yeah. That's it.
Sorry to be Oprah. I wish I was Gail, but we'll be Oprah in that second. Yeah.
Hey, you know what? Don't we all wish we were Gail or Stedman?
Yeah.
You want to be adjacent to the billionaire. Do you really want to be
adjacent, but like still probably left something
right.
in the end?
Exactly. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Rod. That's awesome. And one of your other tweets, you had mentioned that it's basically, it's heartbreaking that we can't call Willie the greatest living ball player anymore. Similar to when Barry hit 660 and he came out on the field to pass the torch to Barry. I feel like he's passing that torch to Barry again. Can you just talk about, that Barry Willie relationship, both from what you've seen and just from, its impact on the Giants organization?
Well, that's what makes Giants. And I'm talking about, let's put aside ship and current front office or whatever. What makes Giants special? And they do this better than anyone. I think they do it better than the Yankees. Do it better than the Cardinals, who do it pretty darn well. They do it better than the Dodgers, the Cubs, all kind of the old school teams. Is that through line? Boy, it is strong and it is unbreakable. And to be able to deal with the death of Willie Mays by knowing that sort of his spirit lives on through Barry Bonds, really, really cool, man. When Mickey Mantle passed away, there was no, they didn't have sort of Mickey Mantle 2.0. Barry is Willie 2.0. They didn't have that. Stan Musial passed away. The Cardinals, didn't have Stan 2.0. Had that. That's what makes this organization, from its New York days all the way where it is now, that's what makes it extraordinarily special. And in Barry's relationship with Willie, and Barry being proud of that relationship and sharing that relationship really makes it really makes it cool. So it's nice to have that, and it's nice to know that Willie's not with us, but he's still here in the form of Barry Lamar Bonds. I think that we as baseball fans, forget about Giants fans, we as baseball fans are lucky that it's not here, and he's still here. Just here in a different name and shape, but there is no Barry Bonds, whether you like it or not. Barry Bonds without Willie Mays. How cool is that?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And he's gonna have the best seat in the house for the Rickwood game tomorrow, and just the timing of that's crazy. But yeah, thanks for a few thoughts here, Rod. We really appreciate it. This was a good time for reflection, and I think a lot of people are gonna take your words. A lot of people already do take your words very strongly and very seriously, and you're very respected in this industry by not just us, but a lot of people. And we appreciate you spending time with us and sharing a few thoughts on the great Willie Mays.
Words are far too kind. I appreciate you, man. The respect goes right back to you. And, like I've said to you before, and I'll say it again, anytime you need me, if I could do it, just let me know, man. But I appreciate you. I appreciate you guys. And nothing but my pleasure, man. Nothing but.
All right. Well, we hope everybody enjoyed those two interviews. They were a blast. And we want to thank again Kerry and Rod for taking the time. And they were very gracious with their time. They were very gracious in wanting to talk about Mays. Rod, by the way, is going to be on KMBR on Thursday morning and Friday morning with the Murph and Mac show, or with the Murph and Marcus show. He'll be filling in for Marcus. You could check him out there. And then Kerry is on Sports Phone 680 this evening. So you could check him out there too. But yeah, anything you want to say, Tyler, before we wrap up?
No, just, thank you to Kerry and Rod for the time. This was something that even 24 hours ago, we didn't know that this was the show we'd be having. And so thank you to them for their time. And, hope everyone's enjoying all the Willie Mays content, because there can't be enough of it. And thanks for helping put this together, Stephen, and rest in peace to the greatest of all time.
Yes, rest in peace to the Say Hey Kid. See you next time.